Hi, everyone.
Now it's live.
We're live. Hi, viewers. Hi, my name is Anna Dardick. My pronouns are she or they. I'm the host of the show Sorted, for which this is the premiere. And I'll get into it in a little bit, but then I want to also announce my friend, Reg Calcagno, who is the Senior Director of Government Affairs.
Correct.
At the center in New York City. Did I get all of that, Reg?
You did.
It's called the center, right?
Yeah, it's called the center.
Cool. I'm so excited to have Reg here with us today to chat about their Hogwarts House and also how that has how that interplays with their life as an activist and as an organizer. So I guess and full disclosure, I'm a Gryffindor. So I just want to get that out of the way before someone accuses me of not telling anyone.
I'm really glad that you got
I hear that all the time. No. So Reg, tell me a little bit about your Hogwarts house.
So you'll notice I did wear the tie for the occasion.
Perfect.
The tie. I am absolutely a Gryffindor. I think at one point you and I discussed that maybe I was a Hufflepuff rising because sometimes, or depending if you know me in a personal or personal context, either a Hufflepuff or a Ravenclaw rising, which makes me think I might have a Slytherin moon, but I'm definitely 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know a whole lot about astrology. Partially on purpose, but when I came to work at the ACLU, there were a lot of people who were into astrology. So I was like, oh wait, astrology is a lot like Hogwarts houses. Like it's not about like facts. It's about like a mnemonic and a model for ways to understand yourself.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, actually, when we talk about house crossed in the fandom, like people are like, I feel like this one, but sometimes it's more like this, like all that kind of stuff. Then it's a lot like a better way of explaining it is like in astrology, how you have your sun and your rising and your moon. So what does that mean in astrology, Reg?
So your sun is like I am, and your rising is what people will perceive you as. So, and then your moon is sort of like who you are, not when no one's looking, but like sort of at your core, that folks may not see. So to cross it over, like I'm a Leo sun, and Leos are known for being like big and extroverted and whatnot, which I mostly am. But I'm a Cancer rising, which means that I may come across as a little bit sensitive. And then I'm a Sagittarius moon, which means that I'm going to be a little bit more impulsive and go. So that's like the very brief nutshell. I'm sure that there are many people who are more into astrology than I am who would give me shit for that breakdown. Are we allowed to curse?
Yeah, absolutely allowed to curse. Also, I have an ex that's an astrologist now, and I feel weird about listen, I don't think he's going to watch this, but let's just say he's very detailedly educated about astrology, and I'm sure it's very I don't know how he makes a living, but yeah. So
I don't know how many people make a living. So
and I regret everything about that relationship. It goes without saying that. So
taking a turn.
So yeah, and so
that someone only learned about astrology once they started working on campaigns, because that's yeah, that came in like big. The last big campaign that I worked on.
Yeah, I think also because, well, never mind. I'll pivot into this, which is so the way I was thinking of Hogwarts houses is that like the sun, what we usually think of as like our main Hogwarts house is like your sun or whatever. And that in my opinion, is like not what Pottermore tells you or whatever. Like Pottermore can be useful in the way that it helps you gut check what you already know. And sometimes you're like, I don't think I got it right, or they did get it right or whatever. But like, it's really about what's in your heart. And then Rising is more like how you have to perform in the world. This is how I think of it. It's probably like an incredible bastardization of what astrology is. And
I feel like you're close enough.
Yeah, it's like ish. So like your rising can change depending on like what you're doing in life or what you're called upon to do. Would you like, has your rising house changed? I think we had talked about it being Hufflepuff, but do you think that it's still, you've changed jobs? You can kind of like talk about how what your work is and how that's been different.
Sure. So my work in a day-to-day, in a normal day, in a non-COVID day, it actually still falls into like 3 buckets, but I work at an LGBTQ community center, and we do direct service. There's a lot of programs where we offer services for recovery and economic empowerment and support, and there's a tremendous amount of activities that go on. And I'm on the advocacy side. So I do a couple things. I make sure that we are getting our government grants to fund all of our programs. And I also lobby for policy changes and help people get like civically engaged. So we have a big push to get called Make Us Count, to get people involved with and filling out the census, which is even more important now. So if you've gotten your form, please fill it out. You can fill it out online. It is fantastic. And we are definitely seeing what lack of funding and lack of representation does right now in real time. So lots of census stuff, and then Get Out the Vote is the other piece of it. And right now, Get Out the Vote is becoming more of a thing around pushing for absentee voting, pushing for no excuse absentee voting, pushing for mail-in ballots, pushing for elections to be postponed, or at least if they're insisting on holding them in person, then postpone them. Don't make people come out, which I think is less of an issue right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of, even today, more governors saying that they're intending on voting primarily by mail, which will be good. And everyone can find their how to get a mail-in ballot. They can find out on their Secretary of State's website. Or since there are only 28 states with a Secretary of State, but you can Google the name of your state and then how do I get a mail-in ballot? And then you should probably find something that's relevant or something of that nature. Vote.org, also a great source, or Turnout 2020.
So in terms of looking at like how my houses inform my job informs my career, informs my houses, it feels like I think my job definitely at the center, coming from my former place of employment, really highlighted for me my moon, actually, my Slytherin moon. It feels like I do a lot more strategizing than I thought I initially did, and definitely try to think like 17 steps ahead, and realized how much I talk about power mapping and like how we can get from point A to point Q. And so Slytherin moon has definitely come forward. I think I wasn't sure where that was. I thought that was a Ravenclaw moon, like I'm really an intellectual. No, I'm not. I'm not an intellectual by any stretch of the imagination.
Such a lie, but sure. But yeah, you're trying to like get part of what being a Slytherin is, or having like a Slytherin, or like using skills that are within the Slytherin tool set, is this like figuring out a way to get to your goal. If one way doesn't work, trying another, and like I think really that more just doing anything that you can to get to what your aim is a very Slytherin thing. It can be really, really useful when you're working in politics or working on just like problems that need to be solved right at the end.
Like I think about so one of the things I realized is one of the stories we tell. So I'm really focused on like the stories we tell and how that informs who we are and how we interact in the world. And like one of the stories I tell when I talk about why power mapping is important, and like the idea of like who has what you want and how can you like get to them to give you what you want and influence them, is when I was like working in Michigan on passing a smoke-free law. I like had one representative on a committee that I needed to move. And like, he didn't need to vote yes. He wasn't going to vote yes. We knew he wasn't going to vote yes, but we could get him to abstain. We were pretty sure that would get it out of committee.
Yeah.
And he could vote no on the floor and whatever.
Yeah. Also, by the way, folks, like, this is something that I only learned once I started working in the sort of back end politics. It's like, it's not only who votes yes or no. You want people, there are like huge links that folks go to on the back end to get people to abstain or to literally like take a walk. There are like tons of abortion related things, because I work in reproductive freedom. There are tons of abortion related things where the game is to get someone to take a walk during a vote, which I didn't realize. So continue, Reg.
Like, don't worry about voting. No. You can have plausible. It's basically like, here's this plausible deniability that we're going to give you. Mm-hmm. And so, but like this guy, he lived in my town. He was a former sheriff. And I realized that like I knew everything about him. I knew that his, and like when I told someone this, they were like, "Oh wow, that's getting kind of creepy." I was like, "Right, but I got the vote." His wife adopted a dog and donated to the same shelter where I got my dogs, and I knew where he lived, so I started walking my dogs by his house.
Oh my
God. He went to the church where someone I knew through my mom's church's bell choir was his former pastor, and so I had him approach this guy. I had someone who he knew like had her granddaughter, who's like this adorable little like big blue-eyed child, go up and be like, "I have asthma. Please pass this." Like,
oh my God. you use this man's grandchild to sway his vote.
I didn't use his grandchild. I used someone else's grandchild.
Oh, sure. Okay, that makes sense.
It was a smoke-free law, and she did have asthma. She couldn't go to the logjam with her grandma like she wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
No, that makes sense, and that's one way that people who don't yet have the right to vote can be active in politics. Is like you can still lobby your representatives, even at the young age of what I assume was like 3, 4.
She was 4. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know,
mm-hmm.
like she would have. I think she would have told you she was a big girl. So
also like, I think that's great. If she really if she was into it, I am all in favor of also indoctrinating children into politics. We're indoctrinating them into everything else. So to draw the line here seems at best rude.
Exactly. I mean, and really, like, it was all about she wanted to go to breakfast with her grandma. She didn't go. There was a very nice tie-in. It wasn't loose. But yeah, he. I didn't think that he knew who I was necessarily because I was young, and he stopped me on the street in downtown Lansing and was like, why are you everywhere? And it was like, well, sir, just need you to abstain. Just, you know.
I'll get out of your life if you...
We don't need to do this.
And he did, right?
He got out of the way. When it went to the floor, he was able to vote whichever way he wanted to because we knew it was going to pass. And so that was it. Like, it was super easy. We just needed to get it out of that committee.
So what happened as a result of the law being passed?
The entire state of Michigan went smoke-free. Which
amazing.
I got to oversee that. And that was in 2010, which felt really late. I think at this point we were part of the Dirty Dozen in 2010 when it went into effect, because there were still a dozen states left. I have no idea. I got out of tobacco control because it wasn't necessarily my forte, but
yeah. No, that's really cool though, because there are more and more people with asthma also. So this opens up more restaurants to them and just makes everyone healthier from not having to breathe in secondhand smoke. So what I'm saying is by dog walking, you can save lives.
You can save lives. You can preserve a person's right to reproductive freedom and justice. Mm-hmm. You can do all sorts of things. And the person who is taking the walk gets the added bonus of cardiovascular exercise.
Wow. You truly can have it all. Is there another point? So you said though, you're mostly a Gryffindor. Is there a specific challenge or time in your political life that having that Gryffindor fire? And I often think of it as Gryffindors are always raring to start something. Yeah. They're sort of creative and visionary and while people are talking things over forever in a meeting and etc. Gryffindors are all right, we're just fuck it, we're doing it live kind of thing. Has there been a part of your activist life where that part of you has really come out?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that when I look at my childhood, where I was the kid who was constantly hey, you need to save the whales and also dogs, and also, why can't I take out this book? I think that's censorship. And also about this, why don't I have a soapbox yet? Mm-hmm. So I feel like I was often starting campaigns and starting political action events when I was still in high school. But I would get people fired up and then I'd be like, all right, peace, I gotta go.
I'm always Gryffindors are not sustainers. We will be there for everyone's in now, we've got to do this. And then once sustaining is required, we're I'm sorry, where were the Hufflepuffs? Please help. Yeah.
Cool, you got this? Great. I did a fundraiser for we had a wave of refugee folks from Albania coming in and my senior year of high school, and we needed fundraisers done. We decided we needed fundraisers done. Someone, probably a Hufflepuff, approached me and said, hey Reg, I think that you should do this, and also the tie-in is they're Albanians and Italians have a good relationship, and you're an Italian. So help with this.
Yeah.
And I literally got I was sure. And I went and was all right, these are the signatures that you need. This is what we need. And this is how we're going to get money. And then literally the person who had approached me did most of the work.
Yeah.
I was very in support of it. The Albanian students found out about it. They thought it was great. They were Reg, you're amazing. And I was this wasn't me. This was, I can't even remember her name. I think it was Courtney. It was Courtney, the Hufflepuff. Courtney the Hufflepuff did it.
Courtney the Hufflepuff actually did all the work.
She did. But there was a lot of I and I lifted her up. I think that was how I learned, like, oh, right, Gryffindors can't take all the credit all the time.
Yeah, I think that's like a one of the, every house has its different sort of like like things in which they're sort of areas in which they lack, or which can be not so much a benefit to them. And I feel like Gryffindors are like, because they're like, all right, let's do this. They tend to like charge ahead, sometimes without getting like a coalitional buy-in that they might need. And sometimes they end up just like not caring about, either they want the credit part, which does happen, or they don't really care who gets the credit, which in the end means that like the people with normally the power anyway end up getting the credit, and instead of like the folks who maybe actually do the work or do the work year round, that kind of thing. I'm curious, something that we've talked about before actually, is typing the presidential candidates as like which house is so and so in. I'm curious that is there like a politico out there that you really identify with that has like, is this like maybe a Gryffindor with either Hufflepuff rising, or and we're seeing Phoenix in the comments says you don't have to choose a house and you don't have to stick with it forever, which I'm like completely in agreement with. I mean, a house is like a gender, like shit changes over time. Sometimes you don't have to like, it's okay for things to be in flux, much like a legit house you can move. So
exactly. It is I think it's very fluid. I think that, and also Elena, I see you. I'm glad you feel heard. Between Gryffindor and getting sorted into Hufflepuff, but like starting the fire and then being like, gotta go. So, yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think through like if there's a politico out there who's a Gryffindor but maybe red as a Hufflepuff. Maybe like Julian Castro. Like I feel like he definitely has like he has so much drive and vision, and like is able to get so much shit done in like I've seen what he's done in Texas. I've seen what he's done when he was in the Obama administration. But I feel like particularly in this last like political cycle, he was definitely viewed as like, oh, Julian, like, yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he was definitely, there was like, he brought the Hufflepuff when I went to see him and Elizabeth Warren do like a rally together. He like brought the Hufflepuff energy.
Yes.
Like his family, his brother was there, like all this sort of thing. And I actually think people a lot of the time, as a staff, we decided he was a Ravenclaw. Yeah, I mean, like that. I think part of it is like the view that we have of candidates might not be like what their actuality is, because it is like what people present to the world can be so different from how they are in their daily life. And I think that houses a lot of the time they come out in how we tackle obstacles and how we, like, when we come across a challenge, what's our first inclination on how to solve that problem or overcome that challenge. So if someone's first instinct is like, I have to get all the information I can about this before I decide what to do, then they're probably a Ravenclaw. I think Elizabeth Warren's like a Ravenclaw with Gryffindor rising. But for Gryffindors, it's like, oh, well, okay, is there something I can start? Is there something, what can I do to like, what's the keystone here?
So Bernie Gryffindor?
I think Bernie is a Gryffindor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like what, I think he's a little bit like me in that I think he's probably Gryffindor rising. And here's like why that's a bit of problem. I think I'm Gryffindor rising, and it's a huge problem for myself. I won't talk like Bernie aside. I think it's a problem because you don't in order to have to be a leader in certain ways and solve problems, you need like an entire a plethora of tools at your disposal. And I think that when you put when you just have like 50 hammers, then that's not as successful as if you have like hammers and screwdrivers and like whatever other tools are. I'm not a carpenter. And so I think so something that like I try to do in my life is like think, okay, I'm coming at this with clearly one like very strong view, and I think I'm right in this because I'm a Gryffindor. I always think I'm right about whatever I think the next step is. But part of considering a problem is also being like, oh, how would I do this if I were a Ravenclaw? Like, what would I be researching? Who would I be listening to? Which is really important. And then like a Hufflepuff is like, how would this actually flow in with the movement as a whole? If I'm coming across a political or organizing problem, like how can I keep the people who are doing this sustained? Mm-hmm. Which is like a very Hufflepuff thing, and incredibly important. Like literally, we would all die if there weren't Hufflepuffs in the world. And the movement is sustained by Hufflepuffs. And then Slytherin being like, okay, I'm thinking about this one way. What if I thought about this 12 other ways?
I'm sorry. As you were talking about Hufflepuffs, I was thinking about a friend of mine who is a total Hufflepuff, who is the reason why I have this tie, because we decided that we were going to do a Harry Potter theme party. And I came up with like what we could do and what could happen and how we could do everything and like come up with different recipes and who we would invite and how we could make it queer and how we could make it like a fundraiser.
All you had to say was Harry Potter party, for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. But we also like looking at who was hosting it, like that in and of itself made it queer. But
I think about half of our leadership identifies as queer or LGBTQ in some way in terms of chapter organizers from the last Harry Potter Alliance chapter census.
This is why it made me happy when you told me that it was okay that Harry Potter belonged to the fandom.
Oh yeah, Harry Potter absolutely belongs to the fandom.
But anyway, so we came up with this whole party, and then they hosted it and planned it and gave me a tie to wear and did everything.
Yeah, they did.
They're 100% a Hufflepuff, and I'm a Gryffindor, and so my Gryffindor Ravenclaw house got to go to the Hufflepuff Ravenclaw house party, and the thing was that like there were only a couple of Hufflepuffs and only a couple of Slytherins, so they became House Slitherpuff for the night. But
yeah, okay, let's turn back a little bit to the political part. I'm wondering if there are like what are you working on? What's something that you've worked on in your career that you haven't talked about yet? That was really exciting and also used skills from like all four houses.
I think probably I'm going to go with the Yes on 3 campaign in Massachusetts.
So what was that?
So in 2018, well, actually, back up. So the state of Massachusetts had passed a non-discrimination law that covered sexual orientation. Many years later, they updated that law to also cover gender identity and expression, which is actually like pretty common. A lot of times when you see like non-discrimination laws in employment or in housing or public accommodations, it may be like sexual orientation, or in 27 states, I can't remember exactly.
20 odd.
20 odd states. There are no employment non-discrimination protections at the state level, like explicit protections at the state level in employment. Sorry, that was drilled into me, so it's hard habit to break. Anyway, but so the state of Massachusetts updated it. They updated it specifically in public accommodations. So trans people had been protected in employment and housing, but not in public accommodations, which meant that like public accommodations are anywhere that isn't your home, work, or school. So how you get there, the store that you stop in on the way there, the restaurant that you eat dinner in or pick up lunch from, the coffee shop where you pick up your morning.
So not necessarily like public things. They can be like private, like a restaurant or whatever. It just means like places that the people go into.
Yeah, exactly. But the big thing around public accommodations is, and what they're really getting at, our opposition is really getting at, is bathrooms. Because there's a fear about trans people in bathrooms, which is ridiculous. We just literally just doing that and washing our hands for at least 20 seconds.
Probably at a higher percentage rate than people did before coronavirus.
Correct.
Than the average person.
But anyway, so we in Massachusetts, so the state passed this law, and then using like sort of an esoteric like ballot provision, they stripped it out. There are 6 million people in Massachusetts. There were 4.5 million voters. Of those 4.5 million voters, 37,000 signed a petition and got it on the ballot.
Wow.
7,000.
Yeah, and not every state can do that, where they have like what's it called, a voter initiated
referendum.
Yeah, something like that.
Something along those lines. So anyway, that was what we were looking at. It started very early. The campaign started really early, and so we had like a good long, I think, 18 months, like 2-year stretch almost to prepare, which was great. So there was the ability to do like the Ravenclaw thing. And I will say that a majority of the people who were in the campaign at the start were a lot of folks who had worked on the legislative side. And knowing them, they were definitely Ravenclaws, which meant that they were like looking at everything. They were trying to figure out
I think that's probably why it started 2 years early, is because they were thinking ahead.
They were, but the thing is,
like the people who think ahead are probably going to be Ravenclaws.
Here's the thing, though, is like, so we knew what our best practices were because we had learned from other campaigns. But the thing with a Ravenclaw is that I feel like there's a lot of that gathering information.
Mm-hmm.
Actually happens.
Yeah.
So even though we had plenty of time and we were like, okay, we need to do this now. We need to, like, this is how we're going to build it out. And this is what we're going to do. And this is what it's going to look like. I kept, as the Gryffindor who was like at a national organization that was going to be working on it, I kept being like, can I go yet? Can I go? Can I go? But can I go? But can we start? Can we start doing the field? Can we start talking to people?
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking to people yet? We need to start talking. We need to start talking to people now. And it waited. They waited on that. But eventually some Gryffindors got into...
They're like, come on, y'all.
The field, and we're like, let's go. And there was I'm thinking through who was on the senior field team. So I got brought on. I was on the senior field team. We had the field director as a Slytherin. The deputy field director is a Hufflepuff. I think they're a Hufflepuff.
I'm assuming also this is something you discussed.
Yeah.
During the campaign. I'm not even joking. Y'all discussed this, right?
No, we did.
Yeah.
And also we're still friends afterwards. And I think we've gotten into this debate like a second time or a third time, because we like, yeah. So we had a Slytherin, we had a Hufflepuff, we had a Gryffindor. I don't know. There were two other like main field people. I know that we had. I think one of them was probably a Ravenclaw. I have no idea what the other one was. Honestly, I also don't know why she was. Yeah. Anyway.
So Katrina just brought up a really good point. They said Ravenclaws write the policy that Gryffindors get everyone excited about, and Hufflepuffs and Slytherins actually put in place. I would only make a slight adjustment to say that Ravenclaws do write the policy. Gryffindors build the public momentum. Slytherins get it actually voted on and enacted, but then Hufflepuffs enforce it.
They do the administration and regulation.
They do the administration, which is like the most important. So many laws get passed, and then everyone's like, "Okay, good job, everyone. Okay, so bye now." Which like we're dealing with in a couple different ways. For some like repro related laws that were like, okay, so. I don't remember what this particular one is, but there will be a law that's like, let's say it's expanding telemedicine for abortion or something like that, which is a best practice because abortion through telemed is just as successful, just as little harm to the patient as in person for a medication abortion. So we have to then like enforce that, like make sure that there isn't are any clinics even doing telemed? How do we help them like set up a way to do it? Like all of those things aren't necessary to actually like put something into place. Like a law doesn't have impact until you like an administration actually like figures out how to push it forward. That's also something I sort of I always was like, oh, so a law gets passed, yay. And then I'm like, oh, you have to have like a ton of people who put in a lot of work into like actually enacting that, like enforcing that law. Sorry, but I just thought that was a really, really good point from Katrina. But you were saying about the campaign, you had like people from a variety of different house identities.
Right. And so like the field director, the Slytherin, was like really great at figuring out like how we were going to get what we wanted for the field team, because there was always the fight between like field looking for money and support and resources, and comms being like, we can press a button and talk to 40,000 people and move them. And I'm like, yeah, but what's your click to open ratio? Burned. It's a big political burn.
Your open ratio being the amount of emails that are opened versus sent.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm like, you're not really moving people. But like a big part of that campaign was actually us, the field team, moving people by having conversations, like doing that deep canvas thing where you're like, as opposed to just, so with deep canvassing, as opposed to just like going and being like, hey, do you support non-discrimination? Yes or no? You say yes. And I'm like, great. Actually digging in a little bit and saying, why do you support non-discrimination? Well, this is why. And like, where on a range are you? And then bringing up the issues. So bringing up, we used to actually show our opponents commercials on the doorstep and take them through, take the voters through like, what does this bring up for you? Do you have any fears or concerns? Can we address those fears and concerns? Like, because like I said, since a lot of people, since the opposition will generally bring up bathrooms and public safety is an issue, that's generally the issue that comes up most of the time with trans people and trans policy, or policies that are placed on trans bodies, rather. It's reminding people like, hey, we're your neighbor, we're your coworker, we're your child, this is who we are, and like this is our humanity, and we belong in public life. So
it's like almost not only the like, it sounds like also like an emotional connection part to really like get at like, this is not an abstract issue, but like something that it's life. but also like almost media literacy at the doors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you're like, this is what you're gonna hear. Let's walk through it.
Let's break this down.
Mm-hmm.
And that like human connection, that human experience. Like I feel like the people who came up with deep canvassing, at their core, may have actually been Hufflepuffs and not necessarily Ravenclaws. Because I think Ravenclaws were like, man, we need to figure out a way that we can like get people to move on these issues. And like, how can we, and they came up with a plan, and then they sent out a bunch of Hufflepuffs, and the Hufflepuffs came back and were like, during A/B testing, we actually found that when we talk about our feelings,
yeah, yeah.
So
and they were like, and Ravenclaws were like, okay, yeah, we can do that, which is great, because I think that there's, for many Ravenclaws I know, there's a hesitancy with the less quantitative parts of like things like open rates and click rates are really useful because they give you numbers, but you don't actually know what those numbers say. Like you have an idea, but you sort of like interpolate them. But like, I'm like hoping that's a word, by the way, don't look it up. But extrapolate and interpolate.
Interpolate.
I'm gonna go Google that really quick. But I think that there's, even like in research too, from like my times doing research, there's sort of there's a discomfort with qualitative work and anything that involves a more relational piece, because it's more difficult to measure, and therefore you can get worried about like, are we having the impact that we want to have? Deep canvassing acknowledges that, but and you can talk about like how, in terms of like rating, like you had people rate themselves as like comfortable from 0 to 10. Talk about that in a second. But I think that like part of why it's so critical is that shallow canvassing or regular canvassing, you knock on someone's door, you're like, hi, this vote is happening, we encourage you to vote this way, so yeah, and you just say like yes or no, or you rate them 1 to 5 on like they're totally here for us, or like they're wavering, or like they hate us, they're not gonna vote at all, or whatever it is. But deep canvassing does something a little bit different. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so deep canvassing, we would rate people on 0 to 10. Like, do you support protections in public accommodations for gay and transgender people, on a rate of 0 to 10? 0 being you completely disagree with that, and 10 being you are 100% in support. And most people will generally rate themselves a 10. And the reason for that is that they don't want to be seen as like being in favor of discrimination. No one wants to be like, yeah, screw those trans people, screw that other group. They like to think of themselves as like good, kind, fair, just people. For the most part. There were some people who were like, no. But particularly in a blue state like Massachusetts, where they like pride themselves on their progressivism, we got a lot of 10s.
Yeah.
But you dug in a little bit and you said, I've heard this argument, or have you heard it? Do you have any reservations about voting that way? People would be like, actually, I might be more of like a 6. Or I might be a 7. Like they wouldn't show necessarily like a huge jump, but they would show enough of a shift that you were like, see, this is a false 10. You don't actually support it. You're like looking to.
Also, because these conversations are in person, and something that we've seen in polling also is that like over the phone polls can get different answers than online polls, because people feel a commitment to like saying, oh yeah, I do remember that politician's name, when they're on the phone with someone, when really they have no idea who that person is, but they don't want to feel like they're dumb, or they're not unknowledgeable, I would say.
But the other thing is though that like that's interesting, because with deep canvassing we have actually done a series of tests on the phone as well, and particularly around like gender identity and trans issues. We could sometimes get people to go deeper with us because particularly if I so in my own experience, I would go and present at the doors, and often wouldn't necessarily come out. At that point, I think I was presenting like more binary assigned female at birth, even though that wasn't the way I identified. Um, but I could on the phone actually tell my story a little bit easier. I didn't have someone like misgendering me to my face at the door, which would happen if I came out.
Yeah.
And that was really that was hard. So, I would talk about friends, or I would talk about other people I knew, or coworkers, or people who were on the campaign. The other thing is that we definitely we found people, because you would sometimes ask the voter. One of the ways we did it, and one of the conversations that we had was you would ask the voter about a time when they felt different or othered. And so you're tapping into that person's core self. And so, I would ask you about a time when you felt different or othered, and you might say you weren't sure, because a lot of people, if we were talking face to face, but if we were on the phone, you might tell me about a time when you had been discriminated against that you wouldn't normally tell somebody. That you wouldn't feel comfortable telling a complete stranger face to face.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know that they've done even more work on deep canvassing by phone. My guess is that that's something that a lot of campaigns have transitioned to during the age of coronavirus. And they've also tried by text, but I haven't heard of incredibly successful text deep canvassing yet. The research isn't out there. I'm curious. So some of this sounds really difficult, that on the door you could be misgendered, that I'm sure that there are that can be, especially exposing yourself emotionally to strangers as part of your job, sounds like it could be really difficult. Was there a way that the campaign, a structure that was created to help sustain organizers who were doing the door knocking and canvassing, or to help people sort of cope with that?
Absolutely. So this is why you have Gryffindors and also Hufflepuffs working together on campaigns. So you have Gryffindors giving pep talks at every single training, and that was where I sort of drew on that strength. There was a lot of I am the person who you can call to gas you up. I will tell you all of the wonderful things about yourself, and why I love you, and why everybody else should love you, and why you should love yourself. And so there is a big.
I feel like Colin Creevey would be really good at that. Just as an aside, if he had survived.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
He needed someone to give him a pep talk to live.
Yeah. That would have worked. You're doing great.
You're doing amazing, sweetie.
Avada Kedavra. You're doing great as the new Protego.
But then you also have Hufflepuffs doing the check-ins. We had with deep canvassing, you do trainings ahead of time, and you do a training every time, and they're in-depth trainings. And so with our organizing teams, both on the volunteer and on the paid side, we would have people check in beforehand. What are you nervous about? What are you afraid of? What is your worst case scenario? And then after every canvas, after every phone bank, there were conversations about what came up. And then actually in the Yes on 3 campaign, and in a couple of the other campaigns that I've done, we would have the debriefs, we would sometimes separate for a little bit. And so you would have the TGNC, the transgender, nonconforming, non-binary folks go and debrief in one room, and you would have the cis folks go and debrief in another room, because they were going to be hearing different things, and the way the way stuff and comments landed on our trans and non-binary and GNC organizers was a little different. We had a lot of kids who worked on it, like a lot of teenagers and college kids who were working on it, college students who were working on the campaign. And I mean, some of the I remember sitting the night before the vote, and I was sitting in this group with like 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds who had been out and were totally accepted and had no problems at their school with.
It's so cool. It's so, like, I look back at my friend group of about 10 people in high school, most of whom I'm really not in contact with, or like those, I like treasure the time with them, and we're no longer really in contact. But I look at that group and I'm like, okay, so at least half of those people have come out, and like 3 are trans.
Yeah. Like,
but at the time, no one was.
I didn't have the words for myself until I was like in my late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I didn't even know the word non-binary till like probably a couple years ago.
Yeah. Like it was definitely a revelation for me when I realized that like you could do this whole gender thing, and it's still like. I have been out for several years at this point, and only just recently came like completely out. Like my family now knows. My family knows I'm on hormones. There's still some questions about like, wow, Reg, you got something on your face. Yes, it's my beard.
You're like, oh, Captain, my Captain.
Your voice. Are you sick? No, this is just my voice now. It's gonna get lower. So, well, maybe not any lower than this, but
it'll be like James Earl Jones.
Welcome.
Ideally.
Look. So, where were we? Organized.
So people divided out into different like caucuses.
So people divided out into different caucuses, and we would process that way. We had folks shaking things off. We also had it set up so that if someone had a really tough time on the doors during their shift, they had a buddy that they could call, that they could talk to. On the volunteer side, we sent people out in pairs. On the paid side, like people went out by themselves. But for a few of our organizers, like if they ran into an issue, they called their supervisor. They called their site director. They called me, and I would, in some cases I would show up. In some cases. The site director would show up. Sometimes they went back to the office. Sometimes they just took a break. They took their break a little bit earlier. They didn't have to go back if they were feeling really uncomfortable. Like we had people threatened on the doors during that campaign, and we had people heckled, and it was constantly a balance of safety and both emotional and physical with the campaign. And so the paid canvassers knew that they were going to be taken care of.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's incredibly important, and also a testament to why having Hufflepuffs, and also it sounds like also trained social workers on staff, because my therapist always, whenever I'm spiraling about something, my therapist is like, what's the worst that could happen? So when you said that you talk about what's worst case scenarios, I was like, oh, that sounds right out of my therapist playbook.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that comes from also having a field staff that went to therapy.
Yeah.
And
highly recommended for everyone. And we realize that there are variations in access if you can access, we recommend.
Yes. And also there are a lot of resources now that are being made available to people.
Yeah, absolutely. My therapist is actually, we had to move our appointment. This is only available so far to people within who are already in the practice, but they're doing a group like support. They're doing a free support group for first responders who are dealing with coronavirus.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, if you go to gaycenter.org, which is the shameless plug for the community center that I work with, we are doing virtual groups. Some of them are closed off to folks who are already enrolled in our groups, but we do have other resources available. So if you're in the New York City area and you are looking for resources around mental health or food or anything, you can also just like call the center actually, and it will still go to all of our intake and referral people. So we have set it up. We have resources. You go to the site, you can actually fill out a form, and it will go directly to the email of whoever is in charge of that area, and we'll get answers for you. So there's lots of ways to plug in. So if you're LGBTQ in the New York City area and need resources.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of the mutual aid network Google Docs have mental health resources listed within them for folks. I've also found even things like if you email your state rep or your state senator, they have people on staff who are like, their job is to help their constituents.
Yes, and your senator is particularly responsive. I know this because he's also the Senator's senator.
So, Brad Hoylman.
Senator Brad Hoylman.
Yeah. I've actually, like, I went to a community meeting once and one of his staff was there and I was like, I'm really interested in this particular bill. And she was like, okay, let me get your email address. Like, let's talk to you. He's already like a sponsor, like a co-sponsor on it, but like, let's talk about how it was really cool. It reminded me, and this is also important for everyone who's like watching, which is your representatives are humans for the most part. There are like probably a few lizards in there, but lizard people. But like for the most part, the people who represent you, whether state reps or state senators, they are normal people, and they want your vote, and they want to like keep people in their district happy. So their staff, they do most of their job is going to be constituent services, which means you call them and you're like, how do I do this? And they're like, we can send you a link to that, or like, we can help you with this or that. Or like, you're like, hi, I have, this was me. I wasn't on the phone, I was on the computer, but like, hi, I have like an extra, we have like gloves here. And I was like, where can I donate them? And literally the like chief of staff for my city council member emailed back and was like, well, there's a sanitation team here that's running out of gloves. Like, I'm a fan. Look, we pay a lot of taxes, and I mean, we could pay more in order to get like free healthcare or something, but we pay a fair amount of taxes. And we should use, like, the government is a tool for humans to use to get what they need.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point. I want to kind of close us out here to talk about, like, now in this moment when we're all in our houses, or ideally, like, for people who are homed, what do we do in this moment? And like, how can like we as Gryffindors, but also like people who identify across a range and a spectrum of Hogwarts House, like, how can we look to, like, what are we doing here? Right.
So I think that you know, as a Gryffindor, it is my responsibility to rally the troops in a safe and socially distant way, which means that, you know, we're reminding each other about why things are important. We are reminding each other about why we are important. We're channeling our inner Hufflepuffs and caring about people and making sure that you know, people have enough food, and that we're, you know, calling our loved ones and telling them that we love them and we care about them and we want them to be safe, and we want to make sure that they're drinking coffee in the morning and checking in with friends, and maybe turning off the screens and like going for a walk if they can, or just letting the sun hit their face. We want to be Slytherins because we want to be able to organize and plan and use this time to strategize about how we're never going to let it happen again. We're never going to let it happen again because we're going to be electing good, smart people who believe in policy and believe in public health and believe in science.
And that like humans should live.
And that humans should live.
A shockingly political concept.
People over profits. And then we also need to be like
people over the daily profit. Just kidding. Free press is very important.
Being Ravenclawish and making sure that we are actually using our own evidence-based strategies and our own evidence-based information, and not panicking and not buying into like it's all gonna be over, it's fine. Like but also letting ourselves go outside sometimes, because if we quarantine for as long as
I think it's a little bit hope punk, right? To be like, yeah, like things are fucked. Let's be very real. Like this is a problem. However, like this is a very Gryffindor thing too. Like then you just try anyway, right? Like you're like fucking, like I believe Neville Longbottom lived in the room of requirement for like over half a year, just like, but sending out teams to fight in Hogwarts. Like that's what this is. This is like you get your people, you do the fighting when you need to fight, but you also like take care of yourself. And everyone on the watching on the live stream from the Harry Potter Alliance, keep an eye out for some distilled messages from our voting rights call with folks from Protect Democracy and the ACLU, and we'll have some more like next steps. I think that as we sort of move through, not get over, but like move through the grief that is involved in an entirely new normal, there are ways that we can encourage people to get their mail-in ballot or get their absentee ballot. And even Elena was saying in Georgia, they're sending a mail-in ballot request form to all voters. It's actually all active voters. So remember if you're in Georgia to check that you are registered as active, not an inactive voter. And also you're going to have to fill out that form and send it in. So there are a few steps. For others, we'll have some action items, but that's mostly what we're going to look at as voting rights, which it will be more and more important for everyone, because democracies should be thriving here, like we pretend it is. I think that thank you so much, Reg, for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Anna. And happy birthday, Anna.
Thank you. It's true. It was an absolute pleasure. Reg and I have been talking about this show for probably over 6 to 8 to 10 months, and I'm so thrilled to be able to start it with you. And also because, and the reason why I did it is because the message I also want to send out is basically like, be vulnerable, do things wrong, use the word interpolate incorrectly. Thank you, Phoenix, for putting the legit definition in the comments. Everyone should, like, whenever I run a meeting or manage a team, I'm always like, I want you to be wrong at least once a day. Like, I want your ideas to be wrong. Like, I want everyone to come out with at least one wild idea that's impossible in this meeting. And so that's sort of my goal for the quarantine isolation, is just to do as many imperfect but cool things as I can. One of the things that is very cool is donating to the Harry Potter Alliance. So the Harry Potter Alliance currently has a fundraiser going on. Yes, you can see it down below, the bit.ly. Oh yeah, it's very cool. Support
like
Granger
that.
2020.
Huh.
Hermione Granger
I
Granger
like
2020.
Huh.
Hermione Granger is running for president. You might know her. She is definitely a Gryffindor, Ravenclaw rising. And of course, Hermione Granger isn't running for president. Just kidding. She totally is. I don't know. I feel like I should say that because there are people who are like, she can't run for president. And I'm like, what if I told you you're wrong? And I don't care. But
I don't actually care.
But like we can also like follow in her lead and fight the fights that need fighting, to quote the movie The American President, which was written by Aaron Sorkin in like 1997. I encourage everyone to watch. So please donate. Donate down below. See this one? It's an amazing cause, and we're training tons of leaders. I'm on the board. We're training like tons of leaders and activists to do organizing work during this election. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Reg. Thanks, Janae, for being on the back end, supporting all of us with tech. And yeah, this closes out the first episode of Sorted. Bye, y'all.